Hey, you like cars? CarQuicks is back. Another episode of the podcast, CarQuicks. Welcome. Let me get my, you know how we do it around here. Go ahead, episode 59. CarQuicks. I don't really like that. There we go. That's more appropriate. You know, I might get a little smaller clapper. I don't know. But that ain't going nowhere. That's part of my little spiel, if you will. So, another episode's back. It's your host, Cameron Biggs, the CarQuicks podcast. Welcome. Glad you're here. Hope you're doing well. The family's treating you well. The cars are treating you well. Your loved ones are well. If you're in Houston, I hope you're doing well with the last hurricane we had with Beryl came busting through here. I was fortunate enough to not lose power. Many people I know lost power. Many people had other tragedies in their family. So my prayers and thoughts are out to them. Anybody in the Houston area, hope you're doing as well as you can be during this time because it's wild out here. But we're here to talk about the car news. Just kind of get our minds off something else, get something a little bit more positive if you're into the automotive scene. And I'm here to do that and to deliver it in the way that I know how to do best. So we're going to drive right in. What do we got? We got some good stuff this week, okay? And I was gone for a little bit because I was out of town. I was actually out of the country, okay? But we'll get to that later in the episode when I just talk about some little updates on my own. But jumping back into BMW. So not the last episode. Last episode was a special one for Bugatti and the Tourbillon because that needed its own special moment in time. And we're probably going to do another one on that too because considering when they start testing and that thing actually lands in the hands of whatever billionaire orders one up, soon enough there's going to be some reviews on it. But anyways, BMW is back in the news, right? Last time I talked about them was about the X3 and that questionable decision on that interior that we all saw, and many people, I'm not the only one, okay? Online, my sentiments were validated, okay? Many people said, I don't know what's going on anymore. I've been trying to hold them down. They're making it difficult. So the 2025 BMW M5 got announced. Now, this is a very big deal, okay? The M5 is, again, another iconic car, another renowned car. It was the standard. It set the standard for the sports sedan. The E39 M5, for instance, was like so far up on the scale of what a performance sedan could do. It was called like the muscle car of the luxury sedans. It had a 400 horsepower V8 back in 1998, 99, 2000 when it got announced. I mean, to this day, that car is still considered one of the greatest BMWs ever made. I personally love them. If I could also have another car, that would be one on the very short list of things I would get. So the M5 has had iterations from the E39 with the V8 in it, the E60, which had the hand-built Motorsport V10, which had its own little issues. But if you can get past the maintenance and the upkeep for that V10, what you got was the sound of motorsports and 500 horsepower. Then it got to a twin turbo V8. Then it got into the latest one we had too, like the F10 model. I don't know all the chassis numbers on the M5 that well, but we had the brand new one, the G81, I believe is what the chassis number is on this one. But things have changed fairly drastically. Let's get to the good. They have dialed themselves back when it comes to the 5 Series sedan. I think BMW is kind of making it so that that particular sedan doesn't go so crazy when it comes to the polarizing design. Still very sharp edges on the bottom lower grille. You'll see it in the pictures floating around. But the front bumper, the side, the skirts, the rear body lines, the rear, going into the B-pill in the trunk, sharp lines, sharp definition of what the car looks like, which is good. I don't think it looks bad. I think this actually looks nice in an aggressive new BMW type of way, which saying that is kind of, in a way, it's kind of like we have to kind of give them almost passes when it comes to how these cars are starting to turn out because we don't have any other choice. I mean, to be perfectly honest, we are left with what BMW has given us when it comes to these cars. So M5 comes out 2025. What is the power? because that is what we're here to talk about most of the time. When they're talking about M5, we're talking about numbers, performance, luxury, speed. This is an Autobahn missile, a cruise missile, a cruising car that pretty much doesn't really feel that great until you get to like 90, when it settles in and it's like, okay, this is what we're here to do. So it's a plug-in hybrid now. Now, before everybody picks up their bags like LeBron in that meme, like, all right, see you later, man, dog, it's over. It's not as bad. I got some things to get to. But plug-in hybrid in this particular aspect is leaning more to the performance side as opposed to trying to make this some efficient model car, because it got EVs and other things you can buy if you're looking for efficiency from BMW. So this is still the ultimate driving machine. So we're hoping that the hybrid dynamics are playing into that idea when it comes to how the car performs. Power-wise, 4.4 liter twin turbo V8, the S68. This time with electric motors assisting, it makes 717 horsepower, 738 foot-pounds of torque. That is major. We're talking about over 700 horsepower. We're cooking now. Now, the standard motor by itself makes 577 horsepower, 553 foot-pounds of torque. Listen, these numbers, like I've said before, we're at the stage in the game now when it comes to cars where like horsepower numbers, like when I was growing up looking at car magazines, we would flip to the car and driver stats to see what the horsepower number was in the 0 to 60, because things weren't as nuts as they are now. Like cars right now are crazy. 600, 700 horsepower is regular. Then you add the EVs, 0 to 60 times is under 2 seconds. You got 3 seconds that are just like, 3.4, it's kind of slow. I mean, that's where we are now. So 717 horsepower all together with the gas motor, twin turbo V8 and electric motors, 190 mile an hour top speed if you get the M driver's package, which, I mean, come on. Why not? If not, it's 155, the same standard that's been on German cars since forever. So this is a fast car, but something has changed. So 0 to 60 is 3.4 seconds. Fast by all metrics of fast, but it's slower than the previous generation. See, the previous generation, let me continue, did it in 3.1 seconds. And if you got the CS model M5, it did it in 2.9. Now you're wondering, how do we get slower with more horsepower? And how did we end up with a brand new M5 that can't keep up with the older one to 60? Well, the M5 is heavy. Now, we are used to new cars being heavy. I just don't know if we have ever seen this amount of extra weight put on. I mean, listen, we're human. Everybody puts on weight. A couple months ago, you might have been 30 pounds lighter. Now you're a little bit heavier. Things change, right? This new M5 is 1,000 I was about to say horsepower. It's 1,000 pounds heavier than the previous generation. Let us all let that marinate on our brains. They built the new M5 and ended up at a weight that was 1 ton heavier than the previous generation. Now, I don't know. I do know how we probably got here. What I don't know is how BMW saw this process and saw this weight gain and continued on the path they were going. But I have some opinions that might contradict what I'm kind of saying right now, that is giving me my opinion on this right now at this given moment, is that this is a step in the wrong direction. But I have some theories on what we might be seeing and experiencing when it comes to these cars. But it's 1,000 pounds heavier. It's 5,390 pounds. The previous generation was 4,380, 90 so odd pounds, right? So this is a bit egregious. I'm not even going to front. Most people that saw this car, they're like, that's more than a full-size truck. We are now dealing with heavy cars. And some of the issues that we've talked about from like crash safety is, hey man, you get in an accident with these 5,000-6,000 pound cars. I mean, I'm in the GR Corolla. My car weighs 3,300 pounds. This car weighs 2 tons more than mine. If I get hit by a BMW M5, I'm gonna be I'm out of here. I'm getting pushed straight off the road. And that is one of the discussions that come when it comes to how heavy these cars are getting. And it's not like it's slow. 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds is way faster than the GR Corolla. Mostly 99% of all cars on the road. So you're talking about a car that weighs this much and is moving this fast. See, those combinations can be bad, especially. But it does have obviously updated things, right? You can get brakes on it. They're like carbon ceramic. It has obviously the stopping power. It has degenerative braking. It has the batteries. It has the motor. These things together add into the weight. So it has a 14.8 kilowatt battery that offers up to 25 miles of pure electric driving. And that's mounted to the underbody, lower center of gravity. It also has a boost control function, right? It yields what they said was instantaneous speed when traveling between 20 and 90 miles an hour. What I suspect they're talking about is passing power. So somewhere on the steering wheel is probably a button like the M button that functions with its boost function, where if you press it, it gives you all the torque and all the power with the electric motors and the gas motor together in one to get you into like the passing mode that's much, much faster than what you would normally have in the car. 8-speed automatic. It also has what they said was the ultimate amount of power and speed outside of the 0 to 60. So here's what I was going to say. And I'm going to kind of come back to some of the other stats and other things that are on the car. Here's what I suspect is going on. We are like armchair enthusiasts. And I say armchair enthusiasts, not from the fact that we don't own these cars that we're talking about, and also that we don't own cars in a genre that we may not like some of the directions they're going. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is I don't have the means to buy an M5, right? So what I'm looking at is what I see on paper, right? And I'm going to jump to some of the reviews and the road tests they talked about on the Porsche T Hybrid, which was the new Porsche 911 that has a hybrid. And on paper and online, if I see 1,000, I keep saying horsepower. If I see because I'm so used to 1,000 horsepower being the number, not 1,000 pounds of extra weight. So if I see 1,000 pounds of extra weight on an M5 that's now a plug-in hybrid back, and I look at the previous generation, right? And the previous generation was twin turbo V8, a little bit heavier, but it actually got lighter than the generation before it. But we're still in this normal V8 big body luxury cruise missile, right? It all makes sense. So you add hybrid into it, we're like, okay, now we're complicating things. It's going to cost more money. It's more complicated. Now you added the battery and the weight. And it's like, it sounds like we've lost what we had before, which was a simplified, high handling, high dynamic driving machine. Now we have what is considered an Autobahn cruise. We just have something that feels good on the highway at 90 miles an hour. But what I think is starting to happen, what we're going to have to come to grips with, I think, on a lot of these things, is that on paper, some of this stuff just doesn't look like it should work. It sounds like it should be heavy, sloppy, numb. And I use the Porsche, for example, because every review I read, the name is Mr. Lieberman. Everybody that I saw the videos on the Porsche T Hybrid said that this thing feels amazing. And on paper, you might dismiss it. In reality, it doesn't miss a beat. And many people said, if I'm looking for a daily driver 911, I'm looking for something that isn't like an ST or a manual one that's more visceral and connected to me on the back roads, this is the one to buy. And so when I look at the M5 and the added weight and the added electronics and the plug-in hybrid, but when I think about what BMW is talking about when they say about this passing power, they said from 50 to 75 happens in 2.2 seconds, which is faster than any M5. And I'm like, I think what they're building are these like highway run cars. And I don't mean highway run like racing that we see on the internet. I'm talking about something where you're going long distances and you're covering a lot of time and a lot of space as quickly as possible. If I was to take a road trip and said, I'm going to drive from here to New York City, from Houston to New York City, and you said you can take this M5 or you can take, let's say, a Lotus Emira. Now, obviously, in my brain, I'm probably taking the Emira because I'm like, listen, manual V6, Lotus, light. I want to have some fun. But if you're really trying to be with like a bunch of people and cruise and cover distance, you probably can't beat what the M5 is going to offer you, especially when it comes to the performance side of driving on a freeway with trucks and passing people. It probably can't be beat at that, in that world, in that space. I think that's where it really starts waking up. And then if you go into the back roads, obviously it's not going to be as connected as an Emira, but it probably can handle its own even in the mountain and the curvy road. So this is what I think is happening. These cars are getting bigger and heavier, but they're turning into cars that are just to cover distance as comfortably and quickly as possible, which is probably what they've always been about, right? If you're thinking about M5s and you're thinking about 5 Series and BMWs and big luxury cars, they've never not been about covering distance. But I think now when I'm looking at how this M5 is built, they're really leaning heavy into that, no pun intended. So some other additions. It now has rear wheel steering, which is probably helping the fact that it weighs a ton more than it did previously. So it has rear wheel steering. I'm sure that probably helps in the dynamics of how it's handling. Outside, like I said, it's more aggressive. It's still understated. It's not, we didn't get giant nostrils like the G80 M3s or anything like that. Adaptive M suspension, electromagnetic dampers are standard on the M5. The body is stiffer all around, for obvious reason it needs to be. Strengthening beams and added chassis strengthening is all on the car now. It has the same all-wheel drive system as last gen, so you can go into 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive sport, 4-wheel drive normal, so that is good to have as well too. And you're looking at about $120,000. That's about where it's going to start, and it's going to get more. And there is a wagon. Now the wagon, I guess, is going to have the same drivetrain. Now, I'm going to kind of contradict myself. I know I was talking about how egregious it is that this car weighs 1,000 pounds heavier than previous. But if you ask me what I think about the wagon version of this setup, I'm all for it. I know it's not like it is a performance wagon. It's not lightweight, visceral performance wagon like maybe a Stasia 260 RS from Nissan. But I mean, wagons are made for the road. They're made for the road trip. So if you're talking about this M5 drivetrain and components and plug-in hybrid on the wagon, that sounds kind of fire to me. And I know it's heavy. I know it's not light, but I'm not looking for a Miata. I'm not looking for something I'm looking to be on the road and cover distance and cut through the traffic and get busy, which means me just putting the gas down and heading for the horizon. Now, I don't know how much this complicates how the car performs. I know the aftermarket when it comes to the M5 has been very robust. I'm sure they'll figure out a way around it because we're smart people. And even though you might see something that's complicated and you say, hey, this no longer can be modified with the likes of me in the garage as, a shade tree mechanic, but it doesn't mean that the aftermarket won't respond to how it is. But like I said, this is headed towards that more luxury performance, luxury being the point of the weight, because obviously if it weighs this much, I'm guessing that it feels good on the road. If you're driving and you're hitting imperfections and potholes and you got the electromagnetic dampers and you weigh a lot, the thing is solid. It's a tank driving down the road, so everything feels quiet. It may feel numb, but I think that is what they're trying to go for. Like, let me isolate you until you really hit the gas and hear the exhaust wake up, or maybe you feel the electronic dampers go into sport mode and now we got some handling. But other than that, we're cruising, eating up road at speed. So the M5 is coming 2025. I think at the end of this year is probably when you can order them. I know I've talked about this series of me speccing out cars live on YouTube, and I'm going to do that. I am going to do that. I just haven't started yet. I haven't think of a title yet, but it's going to be a series of me just speccing out these cars. Some of them I can't afford. A majority of them I can't afford. But hey, this is what we do. Everybody's done configurators, and I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do it on this M5 as well, too, to see what it's going to do. So speaking about German brands, though, and plug-in hybrids and BMW's doing EVs, Mercedes has kind of pushed back on something that they previously talked about. So, the EQ line of Mercedes-Benz, that was them saying by 2030, we're going to have almost an entire lineup of EV cars. Well, they're bringing that right on back to the drawing board, okay? Them EQSs and AMG EQs aren't really moving the way they thought they would. Now, For all the people that have been following automotive news like myself, we aren't surprised by these manufacturers jumping back to try to save themselves, so to speak, when it comes to this EV range of cars they're trying to build. Nothing wrong with EVs. They make sense in a lot of ways. In a lot of places, they make very, very good sense. However, we jumped the gun. We jumped too far off the ledge without gradually offering these things to other consumers alongside of the normal combustion engines. So they're no longer doing an EV only lineup. They are now putting millions behind combustion engines. They even said from the CEO that we are going to have combustion engines well into the 2030s. That's a complete flip of what they were talking before. Now, saying well into the 2030s could be 2035, right? We'll be around for that. It's 2024. And in 10 more years, yeah, there'll be combustion engines. So they're not really seeing anything that's like, oh, wow, we really got a long time coming. Who knows what happens in 10 years? But they are developing more combustion engines. Toyota was one of those companies that got blasted for not adopting EVs sooner. They're saying they're slow to the drawing board. They're not doing it fast enough. Now their CEO, I think it was Akito, he said this proves that he was right, that it was about hybrids, that it was about building more efficient motors, efficient cars. We will get to that point of what makes sense, especially with the fact that we don't even have infrastructure. But I have to say that over and over again. Our infrastructure for charging cars is not where it needs to be. Ask the owners of Teslas during this hurricane here in Houston, okay? If you were trying to charge an electric car that you didn't have it off of your house with power, you were looking real sketch, okay? It wasn't looking good for you. Infrastructure is not there yet. But anyways, Mercedes is dialing that back. They're going to develop more engines. They're not the only manufacturer, just one of many that has come back to the drawing board to say, hey, we need to do something else. We need to make small, compact cars that are cheap and efficient. Ford said that now, too. They were notorious for saying we're not doing nothing else but SUVs. But as they've come to say, none of the batteries, none of the things that it takes to build these cars, none of it is cheap. You can't have giant batteries and big SUVs and think that you're not going to have a $50,000 SUV or car. And these government incentives are only if you're in that tax liability. Yes, they'll show that $7,500. That doesn't mean you're going to get it. You may only get 1,000 of it or 500. It depends on your tax liability. It's not a guaranteed like, hey, if you buy an EV, we're going to take 10,000 off the top. No, it's based on whatever your tax liability was going to be anyways. And if you don't have one like that, because I've looked into it for myself, I was like, this ain't going to work in my favor. I'm still spending a lot of money for something that I'm not truly standing on, especially with the depreciation on EVs. Got to chill out. Now, keeping up with the EVs, Ford did release a new EV for the European market, and it was the Capri. Now, interesting enough why I brought this up is because you'll see from the pictures, the Capri looks very much like a Volvo Polestar or the Polestar because they have their own name. I don't know if maybe the Ford just trying to, pay homage to the Polestar, but looking at these two cars, this is dead on the Polestar. The Capri, there's really no news on this for the European market, but it's a 200 to 250 mile range EV, compact, small, supposed to be under 40,000. I'm not mad at this. Obviously, Ford, if they're trying to have people adopt EVs, the only thing that we have here from them is the F-150 Lightning and a Mustang Mach-E. It would be cool to have something that was compact and small under 40 that got that type of range. A little bit over 200, though. I think 200 is a little too low. I think 253 is the bare minimum that you need to start pushing for have people adopt these EVs. Now, staying on Ford real quick, though, they did do something interesting. So I was reading an article about the GTD Mustang, which is ridiculous, okay? If I had the means, among other things, yes, I would. So if you buy a GTD for $325,000, they have an option that allows you to lock the color that you choose. Now, many people have done paint to sample, but there's no exclusive lock, I don't think. I'm sure if you have enough money, you can tell Porsche, hey, don't give nobody else this color. And they'll be like, fine, cool, give us $1 million. So Ford has an option, and it's called the exclusive extended color palette lockout option. Okay, another thing too, whoever is naming these things, please, for the love, you could have called it the lockout color option or exclusive lockout color. I mean, did it have to be exclusive extended palette lockout option? That is nuts. That's a whole sentence. Now, anyways, if you choose this option, I don't know the price of it. I thought it was like $1,400, which seemed really low. But I think that was talking about how many colors are available possibly. But I'm sure it costs probably 10, 20, 30,000 extra dollars on top of the 325 you're already spending to have somebody never pick that blue or that yellow color you chose. But it won't affect the standard color, because that'd be crazy if they said, hey, yo, guess what? Nobody can get that white color. However, on another flip side, I did laugh in my head when I read this, because I was like, yeah, they act like they got a lot of these GTDs. You're only making about 300 of these things, if not less. So there ain't gonna be too many people fighting over a color, especially if I'm spending $325. For certain, I'm getting a custom color. Why would I get a standard black, red? Like, get out of here. Give me the custom palette exclusive lockout double wishbone option, whatever this one was. Okay, so Ford is giving GTD owners that, which I think is cool. I think it gives them separation. I don't know if the Ford GT had that, which if it didn't, that's interesting that the GTD gets it. But again, we're shooting for these 300,000 plus car owners. They want some more exclusivity outside of the fact that you're driving the most expensive Mustang ever created. Now back to Mercedes though. Mercedes announced their new 2025 AMG GT63 Pro. Now the Pro one, and I love this car. I think that this Mercedes is like the last of kind of the simple big engine, front wheel drive, long nose coupe, two-door sports gentleman sedan, similar to like Aston Martin, similar to like old Jaguars. I just love how this car looks, and I love the idea of what it is. So they have the Pro version. Now the Pro version is geared more towards track, geared more towards fast driving, stiffer suspension, better chassis control, fixed wing, titanium back, carbon ceramic brakes. And it still makes 603 horsepower, 627 foot-pounds of torque. The regular coupe makes, I think it was a little bit less than that. It's 26 horsepower over the normal coupe, I believe, of the previous generation Pro. But it slots between the GT63 and then there's the GT63 performance hybrid model that made 805 horsepower that had a twin turbo hybrid powertrain. This one's still though 0 to 63.1 seconds, 197 miles an hour top speed, and you know, like I said, geared towards the track. Michelin Sport 5 tires. You can get some Cup 2Rs on it, extra radiators for cooling. There's no official price, extra chassis bracing. This is the handling. This is like the GT3 one, right? So you got the Turbo S, like the 805 horsepower one, but then you have the GT3, which is like, I'm about the driver experience. Now, personally, for me, I'd get the GT3 Pro one because I think it's the right balance. 603 horsepower is more than enough. 805 sounds absolutely crazy. But again, if I got a heavier car, more complicated system, more power doesn't mean I'm using it. I might want this because I can catch the back roads, catch the track, and have a good time. So Mercedes is bringing that back. It should start around probably 200,000 because the regular GT363 is 180,000, which is, man. You would think that some of this stuff wouldn't be as crazy of a price tag, but given how this thing looks too, it does look the part of 200,000 or 180, though the SL looks very close. It looks very close to how good this looks too. So SL 63 might be all you need. Now, speaking about hybrids and iconic cars, Honda is bringing the Prelude back. We saw a teaser of it many podcasts ago. I talked about it. And in Europe, they officially said this is coming to production. Now, will it look like what you see on the screen right here? I hope so, because this looks good. But now we get into what is a Prelude? What is it supposed to be? So what they announced for the European market, that it will have an eHEV hybrid powertrain, which is a 2-liter 4-cylinder motor with 2 electric motors that makes 181 horsepower. Now, that ain't the greatest number. I know people aren't going to be running for the hills like, oh man, they surely knocked it out the park now, because 181 horsepower in this day and age, especially with how this looks, that's really what the crutch of this whole thing is. If this Prelude looks like this got to have more than 181. I mean, look how this looks. It's just a swooping coupe style. It looks clean. There's some Porsche love in there when it comes to the rear and how it looks from the rear end part of it, the rear quarter panel. But 181 is like, I mean, we might as well have just, I don't even know what, because the SI has more than that. The Civic Hybrid has 200 horsepower. Why would the Prelude looking like this only have 181? Now, the European market is completely different than the US market. So I would suspect that it jumps to 200 for the US market. But here is where Honda has a problem. The CTR, the Civic Type R, is just that good. 315 horsepower. I have a GR Corolla. These two cars are constantly compared. The Civic Type R needs no introduction. Honda knocked it well out the park, out the stratosphere when it comes to front-wheel drive sport compact cars, delivering high levels of performance. Quality of the engine, quality of the car. The entire thing is built at a very high level. It is extremely good. So if the CTR is in the mid $40,000 range, and you have a Civic Si that's coming at the 30s, if you were to slot the Prelude in there with a 250 horsepower motor, maybe they feel like that's too close to the Civic Type R. Then if you want to charge 40,000, then maybe it's splitting it too close. You charge 35, you charge 38, 36. Let's just say you start at 40 and it goes to 42, and the Type R takes it from there and goes to like 46. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe you just make a 250 horsepower one that just has an automatic, even though a manual would be the right thing to do and what people want. I just don't know where the Prelude sits and where it goes. It does look nice, it does look good, but when you have a Civic Si making 200 horsepower and a Civic Type R making 300 and over 300, this could slot in the middle. But the question is, who are they trying to target? Are we targeting a two-door coupe that's fun to drive? That's a very niche market. Or are we targeting the previous Honda Accord coupe owners and buyers that wanted something that was two doors, sporty looking, but was efficient, kind of a sporty hybrid? Then you can do it that way too. Though nobody's going to be happy because the previous Prelude people are thinking about Type S's and H22 motors and 200 horsepower back in the mid 90s. So if they were to drop the Type S powertrain in there, similar to what they did for the Acura Integra Type S, and say we're making a Type S Prelude, I don't think that they put a 300 horsepower motor in there, because, I mean, that's sabotaging Type R prices, or it's impeding on them, and who knows what they want to price for that. So we don't know what the Prelude is going to look like. We don't know what overall the package is going to be. They're hinting at what they're leaning towards. So don't be disappointed if it comes to America with a 200 horsepower plug-in hybrid, something in the CVT, because it's looking that way. Now, speaking about some automatics, though, the GR Corolla is getting an automatic. Now, on the forums, there's been a visceral amount of people like, yo, they done tarnished the brand. The GR Corolla was only for the people driving manual. Don't care about these folks that don't know how to drive stick. They shouldn't even be considered. We should have been done X, Y, and Z. We should have had the car exclusive. However, I do understand the landscape of these sport compact cars that are niche and unique, that the more people that are driving them, the better we have for more cars being developed, more aftermarket, more things, and more better things. So I'm not against it. And this is just a normal, this isn't like a CVT. This had that DAT transmission they talked about. I talked about this many podcasts ago. It's called a direct automatic transmission. And they did videos on the DAT Yaris against a manual Yaris, and it was performing very good. Now, the new GR Corolla coming out does have more torque, and it has a redesigned fascia they said in the front. We don't know. It's just from leaked documents. But I'm not knocking it. And I know some people got GR Corollas right now that daily commute them that are like, hey, I'll trade this in for an automatic one if it can hold the power, do the same thing it was doing before. They're not against it. So I'm not mad at it. I want to see more people driving the car because it's just that fun, and the more the merrier. Now, speaking about this whole, going back to what I talked about with the Porsches, right? Just going through my notes. The Porsche hybrid, like I said, was shown to be well above whatever the numbers on paper showed. The numbers in the paper showed complicated hybrid system, a little bit of heavier weight. Porsche that no longer was attached to the visceral experience, because you can't get a manual, you only get a PDK, even though GT3s and GT3 RSs only have PDK. So all the people crying about Porsche losing its way with no manual, I'm like, them GT3s are running the streets and they don't have a manual, and they haven't for a while. But I digress. Now, the T Hybrid, I was looking at the reviews and the videos, and everybody says it's great. Daily driving, commuting, its performance is great. It handles great. You can't even tell it's a hybrid. If nobody told you it was a hybrid, you wouldn't even know it was. It's how good it performs and how well it performs. And that doesn't surprise me, because Porsche isn't, I mean, they don't play around. They also know how important it is for their 911 to remain a 911. So I'm not shocked to see that, hey, guess what? The 911 is performing like a 911. So I have more to see, more to reviews, but hey, I would love to drive one. I definitely would. And maybe I'll arrange that later. I don't know. Things are shaping up for me. So T Hybrid is actually still a great Porsche. No need to worry that the 911 has been tarnished. Yes, it would be nice to have a manual on it, but I think a manual might come later. I think this first iteration, when it comes to having this hybrid system, they have to first get all the, not the kinks worked out, but they have to get the people in the car performing and driving, see what they say. Because Porsche is one to answer the call when buyers are saying, hey, we want this. They have responded to it. Now, before I wrap up everything, the Goodwood Festival of Speed is going on. I'm going to get to the show. I promise. Okay, that is a bucket list thing that's happening. I shall make it to this Goodwood Festival of Speed, because I want to look up what it takes to actually get there, because I know you have to have, obviously it's in other countries, you got the plane tickets, hotels, and things like that. I would love to bring my son, or my other son as well too. He's not the biggest car fan, but experience-wise, it's great for him to see there and be there and do that. Goodwood is coming. So they have the Goodwood Festival of Speed. The most no news right now is Lotus crashing their Evija X prototype into bales of hay right off the starting line. So whoever driving this 2,000 horsepower EV clearly forgot about instant torque. If you got 2,000 HP in the electric mode, I'm sure it got 1,800 foot-pounds of torque or something nuts. Does a burnout at the starting lineup, crashes into the bale of hay. The grand opening, grand closing. Okay, done. Now, outside of that, WRX, well, it was WRX. Subaru showed off a WRX rally car that looked absolutely menacing, sinister, very Gymkhana style. Another slap in the face, okay, for the lack of an STI. All I saw when I saw that thing was, okay, so if I tone this down just a tad, I would have an STI, but we're not going to go down that road anymore. We already know what they're doing. So another thing that came out, there was the RB17 from Red Bull. So the RB17 was this hypercar that Red Bull has been rumored talking about for a long time now. Many people have been talking about it. I think their previous gentleman that was running their F1 team for the aerodynamics, Nui, he was also involved with the development of how this car was aerodynamically. But it's a 1,200 horsepower V10, naturally aspirated, built by Cosworth. Now, I've been yelling and screaming about Cosworth and what they've been building and doing, because they really have been on their game. They've always been on their game, but very recently they've been more in the news when it comes to all these cars coming out. This V10, naturally aspirated, makes 1,000 horsepower and red lines at 15,000. Let me repeat that again. A 1,000 horsepower V10 naturally aspirated, redlining at 15,000. That's not a motorcycle engine. That's a car engine. It also has 2 electric motors with an extra 200 horsepower. Together we get 1,200. Listen, this is crazy. This is a pure track hypercar only. They said there isn't even a reverse gear. What it has is the electric motor to help it creep around a track and to maybe back into a parking spot where you're in the paddock or you're in the garage. But this is a strictly track only hypercar. They said at 150 miles an hour, it's producing 3,700 pounds of downforce. Essentially mean I can probably drive upside down. Okay, because the car doesn't weigh 3,700 pounds. I'm sure this thing weighs under 2,700 pounds, might be even lighter. So we're talking about more downforce than a car weighs. So essentially you could say I could drive it on the ceiling. It will only have 50 made. So 50 made, you will need to service it every 5,000 miles. and it costs $6.4 million. So for the 50 people out there that want to have a track toy that costs north of $6 million, we got it right here. RB17, go and grab yourself one. Now, as far as the GR Corolla updates, there aren't many. Like I said, I was busy. I was out of town. I was in Mexico with family, with friends, enjoying my time. And the GR Corolla, what do I have? I have ideas I want to do next. I am really back and forth. I so want to do something aesthetically for the looks of the car, right? And I haven't even gotten to it yet because stuff costs money. And okay, woe is me. First world problems, right? So Sard released their parts for their car. Their, all the wings and the body kits and the front lip and the side skirts. The side skirts I'm sold on 1000%. The rear wing I'm sold on pretty much 99%. Okay. But the front lip is where I keep going back and forth because I don't know if it answers the look and the idea that I have in mind when it comes to the car. The other problem I have is not necessarily the price, because the price makes sense for JDM parts, but it's the distributors in the US that I'm dealing with that I'm like, not to say that businesses shouldn't have a means to make money, because they should be profitable. That is always a good thing. But if I'm looking at a part that costs $800 or $1,500 from Japan, and I can get it shipped over here from other companies for under the price that they're charging, but then I look at your price and you say we got to ship it from here to our warehouse and to your house, you got to pay for shipping, but we're charging $500 to $1,000 more than MSRP. It just really makes me just sit around and say, okay, what are you giving me that the others can't give? Now, if it's you replace anything, if it shows up broken, I guess that's insurance, but I don't know if the insurance needs to cost an extra $1,000. If it is customer service, I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to you on the phone or via email, send you an initial deposit, start the process. When the parts come, pay for everything else, you're going to ship it to my house, and then that's it. I don't know. On one side, I understand it makes it easier because you can trust that they're going to handle everything on your own. On another hand, if I do it myself and go to a place like Black Hawk, Japan, you're on your own if something goes wrong and so on and so forth. And plenty of people have done it both ways. So there's probably two schools of thought. I'm on the fence with either one, but I would like to at least order the side skirts and the wing for this car. The front lip, I'm still deciding what I want to do. Do I want it to be carbon? Do I want it to be carbon so it can match the wing? Because the wing is carbon only, but I don't know yet. It's something that's coming, but I am thinking about things I want to do next, videos I want to shoot for. I'm leaning even heavier into this podcast even more because I was listening to some podcasts I listen to all the time, and it talks about, I love doing this podcast for cars, and it talks about loving to do something and leaning into it more, pushing more into it. So that is something I'm going to do. While I was in Mexico, I actually shot a video real quick, real guerrilla style, like vlog style on BYD, because while I was there, BYD's in Mexico and they had some cars set up, and I just wanted to go check them out because I've talked about them enough. We've heard about them. We've heard about the tariffs they have on the car. We've heard Elon Musk talking about those cars come here, it's going to ruin the EV market we have because they're so good and so cheap. Some people don't trust it because it's built in China, even though we build iPhones and everything else in China. So I don't really know what that would mean. But regardless, BYD has been in the news because, one, they're building cars quickly. They're in a lot of countries, and they are undercutting the competition a lot. Does everything look the greatest? Some of it's kind of generic looking. And they also are testing some supercar in Nürburgring that they said is some like 200 mile an hour hypercar, probably going up against whatever the Tesla Roadster is going to be if it ever comes to fruition. But I shot that video. There's another cool video I saw from VinWiki about an abandoned Ford GT that they found that looks like it had been sitting in a moldy garage for at least 20 years, and they're going to restore it. So that's going to be a cool video to watch. Lewis Hamilton actually had a really good moment because he won at Silverstone as his last race, a Mercedes-Benz driver to take the record for the most wins at one track in his hometown. So that's cool before he heads to Ferrari. And, that was it pretty much on the news. Like I said, I was in Mexico. I was chilling. More episodes are coming. The little, configurator live video thing I have in mind, that's going to come too. I've been back on my music tip. Now, if you ever listen to these videos, if you ever listen to the intro and the outro of my YouTube channel, like and subscribe. If you haven't, go ahead and do that. Any of the music you hear was produced by me. So I've been very much in that mode of doing that, and it's going to be a great time. And like I said, glad to be back. Another episode in the books. And as I always say, do as you wish and do as you may. It's Cameron Biggs, your host, and this is CarQuicks. Peace.